John, over to you.
Oh, great. So, as I said in the previous episode, which I assume we're going to be putting in that order, unless we change our mind again, I was challenged to write down my pop to get my philosophy of practice down in Obsidian. Um, and it it is fascinating. I'm still in the process now. Literally up until I joined this call, I was still uh, working through it because I spent a lot of time this week thinking, and then I was like, right, I need to get something down. And in some ways, it's really hard, and in other ways, it's really easy.
Yep.
It's like, yes, however. And the moment I started putting stuff down, so one of the first things that went down was simplicity because my namesake. And then I started sitting with that. And then I was like, huh, what do I actually mean by that? Okay, that's what I actually mean by that. Ah, okay, that's not quite right. And so what I ended up doing was kind of going a bit, I went full brainstorm on my values, taking the words that jumped out at me immediately as I was saying them, as I was thinking about them, as I was thinking about experiences that I've had, especially in the last week, which has been a bit of a rough week for me, which is great because it's given me opportunities to like think about this deeper and allow me to stay in alignment in integrity with like me, which is one of the things that has been a struggle for me. I can remain in integrity with other people and hold them as like capable and all that stuff, but when it came to me, I very much put my stuff, like I was unimportant for a very long time, and so that is something that I'm working on, which you'll probably see within that. Some interesting things that came up for me. So I had a big brain dump. Um, and I had words like honesty, responsibility, kindness, compassion, understanding. You can all read this as well. It's public as far as I'm aware. Um,
Is
there
it
are a
a
bunch.
file then?
Yes, yeah, yeah. I put the values brain dump inside of the actual pop because they're all things I believe, but also or things that I hold important. But there is a group, there is a an overarching value linked to that.
Right. Do you have it in a canvas as well, or is it just
Yes,
written
I have it in
orally?
a canvas. I went nuts with the canvas because I was like, I am thinking about too many of these things and I can't keep it in my head. So get it out of my head. Let's go. Yeah. So some interesting stuff that came up was self mastery was one of the words that I found. And then as soon as I sat with that for 2 seconds, I went, no, no, no,
Why?
because the mastery assumes there's an end point that I can master myself, and
Interesting.
that to me doesn't quite. It's like if I am a fluid dynamic system that changes based on the environment, is it actually possible to master myself? Can I have mastery of myself? As that to me denoted an endpoint.
Interesting. So, are you familiar with the growth mindset and Kerouac?
Yes.
So, this is a misunderstanding I've seen in literature when people say mastery, growth mindset leading to mastery. They miss out the second word that Carol always uses,
Hmm.
orientation. Mastery
Ah.
orientation. It's a direction towards mastery, but there is no endpoint to the mastery. It's an ongoing development, it's a process of trying to find mastery. Mastery, in her terms, being the expertise of skills.
Hmm.
So mastery orientation is the combined term that she uses. But when I
Hmm.
hear it spoken about publicly on social media, on the internet, and in less formal blogs, it's always mastery, and that's
Yeah.
it. And like you say, it denotes an endpoint. But the original idea was that it's mastery orientation, similar with task orientation. There is a
Yes.
direction, it's a process. So maybe adding orientation will help help that, but
I
I'm curious
like
to
the
see where you
word
went.
orientation, self-orientation. I quite like that. That feels a little bit more good. I need to play with that a little bit more and sit with that a little bit more. But yeah, it feels good. That matches what I strive to do.
Because the way I see it is like with a compass, you could say, okay, my true north star, whatever term you want to put there, that's where you want to aim for. Well, orientation is moving that dial. So
Yeah,
mastery orientation is moving the dial in the way you want to go, in the path down you want to go, but you're never going to get there because you're always striving for a mastery orientation. If you want to get to north and you're orientated south, then you need to realign yourself, i.e., look at mastery orientation again.
yeah, yeah. I like that. And another one that caught me was simplicity, because I used yours like your layout because it was good and easier and meant I could just focus on the things I wanted to think about. And one of the words that I jumped to really quickly because of what I do is simplicity. And I put simplicity in there as having the right amount of something, knowledge, information, physical things to do what you want. And then I was like instantly questioning that. And I was instantly like, can there ever be a right amount? I suppose, but it's variable, so it can change depending on the environment and how well we're attuned to it if we use ecological. And I'm like, okay, cool. That sounds like a bunch of beautiful words that I understand, but what do I mean with that? Which was in because I felt it needed to be clarified further. Um, and then I had a question: is it dependent on expertise? Which I would assume yes. So I'm like, okay, cool. So what is simply? And I'm still there sitting there, and I've been sitting there for the last couple of days. I think I did this yesterday, and I was just in town with my kids, playing some stuff with them. And I was like, all right, man, because the original thing that I had is simplicity is enough, which is having enough to do the things you want. And I'm like, yeah, but once again, that's binary. There feels like there is a right enoughness.
Mm-hmm.
And there's too much of an assumption there when that doesn't exist. That's not it's variable all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not static, which means simplicity is much more complicated, which is cool.
Simplicity is complex.
Yeah. Simplicity is probably I suppose, is being, and I'm spitballing, is being on the edge of complexity. It's that balance between complete chaos and not complete chaos, whatever that looks like.
So, what if complexity and simplicity were the
Are
same
the
thing?
same thing. Ooh.
Because simplicity is reduced complexity.
Yeah.
Different words for the same continuum, I guess you could say. Effective or non-effective, complex or simple.
It's all about complexity. It is all about complexity because that's the world we live in.
So I don't know where simplicity is on your pop, whether it's part of the lexicon that you're choosing to use or
Lexicon,
whether,
yeah.
yeah. So for me, I have simplicity as reduced complexity. That's how I have it. And then when I look at developing my philosophy of practice inside of practice design, I look at reducing the complexity or looking for simplicity when doing a certain task, doing a certain action. So when I'm building a system for productivity, for example, say I want to get my work done today, I'm looking for simplicity. I'm looking for reduced complexity so that I can get things done because it requires less energy, because reduced complexity requires less energy when you think about organismic energy expenditure. That's the way I view it.
Yeah. I've kept my original thing so I could think more, but that is a very delightful explanation of what I'm trying to say.
That's my current thinking. Obviously, thinking it evolves, it changes, it's dynamic. But like I say, I think where you got caught up potentially is looking at simplicity and complexity as different things.
Yes. Yeah. I think there was another one I had that did this. Yes. This was an interesting one, which I think would be fun to explore. Understanding.
Hmm.
So I went. It was interesting. When I first just wrote both of these words down, I put understanding twice. Understanding emotional and understanding knowledge. And I'm like, why do I instantly think they're separate? Why did I assume that they are separate? Do I believe that they are separate? Well, I don't know, because maybe, but maybe not. I think it's the process to me feels slightly different. But then I am questioning that instantly as I say it out loud.
How how much have you looked into the epistemology research around understanding and knowledge?
None at all.
Okay, I have experienced some research. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, just a tad. So there's a concept called cluster concept, and
Oh.
a cluster concept is a concept that encompasses various other concepts within it. And this
Mhm.
is, I explained this yesterday on the Open Discord event, the recordings inside the Discord for those interested. But I was explaining this with my note types and saying that I have a source and I have a research. And yes, I have essay research notes that have an output, a thing to them, but they're on the same level as a research file. So even though you could view it as a hierarchy, there's no top level, bottom level, there's no up down, bottom up thinking, none of that. They're just clustered together. And it's
Mm.
similar with these concepts of understanding and knowledge, because understanding can be before knowledge, but it can also be after knowledge, because
Mm.
everyone has some interpretation of information, which is,
Yeah.
by definition, an understanding of it. Is
Yeah.
it as deep an understanding as someone with more knowledge? Potentially not. But then that means the person with more knowledge has a deeper understanding of a topic, which means there is a scale of understanding from low to high levels of understanding, which is a scale that relates to, in some way, their knowledge, collected knowledge, how they define that knowledge, potentially that's procedural or whatever other word you want to put next to knowledge. But they know something, they have information that can inform their understanding. And even with two different levels of understanding, the related knowledge can be different. And if you've got different levels of related knowledge with high levels of understanding, you can lead to different conclusions, which means understanding is a cluster concept because there is no top down, bottom up
Yeah.
interpretation or explanation of the word, because they could both be top and both be bottom at the same time.
Yeah.
So when you look at understanding and using understanding as a word, I would describe understanding very differently from most people, because to me, understanding is dependent on the way that you use it, the context you use it in, as to whether it is being a high or low, or having a high or low relation to whatever else it is that you're saying. So when I say, oh yeah, I understand what you're saying, I do understand what you're saying from my perspective, but I don't
Mm.
understand what you're saying from your perspective because I don't have your experience, but I still understand. And this is where explanations of what's going on to me can be ill-formed or oversimplified. On Twitter, I've been having a couple of conversations, and the person I'm speaking with likes to use the words right and wrong. And to me, that adds binaries that oversimplifies information, which makes
Yeah.
explanations inaccurate.
Yeah.
And it's the same with understanding.
Yeah.
I can understand you, but I also my understanding of you is wrong and right at the same time.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
what I've got and what I've put in there for now is understanding and is an interpretation of knowledge from a single perspective. Not sure about single. I put perspective and then I added single in as I was talking. From a perspective, it's not quite right yet, not quite settled on that, but it's closer. And it doesn't as you were saying, because it is clustered, it is dependent on. Yeah, but yeah, I like that for now as an overarching meaning, because it's not really a very specific description. It's great.
What I found with the lexicon and what I found with my own language is that I use other terms that I have much more refined understanding of or deeper understanding of to explain newer terms to me. So when I'm exploring a new term, I'll use terms that I'm already familiar with to explain them. Then as
Yeah.
I gain deeper understanding, I can then refine those explanations to myself. This concept of a lexicon, having a lexicon of yourself and explaining it and writing it down, I've always done through my language, especially when I'm writing essays, because I need to understand the meaning behind the words that I'm using so that I can convey the argument appropriately.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that's the part of the pop that you've gone into most.
I do have other things too. I just get
Okay.
excited about meaning of words because that the words have meaning. People have meaning. Not that thing that I know, but I can't say because melty.
Meanings are in people, not words.
That's the thing. That's one of mine as well. It was interesting how at first, when I was first exploring it, I thought, oh, well, mine and Danny's are pretty similar. They're almost the same. And then when I started looking at mine and going into my deep, I'm like, oh no, this is different. Oh no, that's different. Oh no, I don't agree. No, that doesn't. No, not quite for me. Oh, that was it was really interesting how my original assumptions of myself were very similar to you. But actually, as I went deeper into what I was thinking and exploring that, it was different. It changed, which was really interesting. So my values that I'm settled on for now are integrity, commitment, and curiosity. Those are the three that I've got. And each of them have beautiful, like, I think they're all clusters based on what you described to me. They're clusters of other things as well. They're not like hierarchical or I really liked how you explained the cluster concept because I was like, yes, they are clusters of values, not a single binary value, which is when I first started doing it. I'm like, no, I have to have three because that's what Danny's got. And then I'm like, well, no, I don't have to have three. I can have as many as I want. It's my bloody thing. And then I'm like, yes, but, and then of course I went into simplicity. I was like, yeah, but that makes it harder. So can I boil what I have down into three core values? Yes, I can. Here they are. And that really helped me instead of trying to like get it right first time. As I was first doing it, I was like, I must get this right. I must do it right and I must have it all beautifully like presented so that I can come on here and sound like I have high expertise in everything. Kind of like, no, because that's not in integrity because I ain't got a bloody clue because this is the first time I've done it. So shut up and just do what you can, which is exactly what I've done. And as I keep going, I went from values. The values then started bleeding into the philosophy. And then suddenly the philosophy started giving me the goals. And then there are other pieces that I'm still playing with.
Now,
So it's
I'm
kind of
intrigued. I'm
yes,
intrigued by the bleeding into the goals bit because obviously you are someone that is quite vocal in your disdain for certain goal setting. So I'm
yeah.
curious
I
how
hate
that
goals.
happened, how that worked.
None of them are necessarily that they're more directions.
Open goals.
But yeah, they're open goals basically. So and these are still in progress. And I realize I have some biases right now with what's happening in my life. So they will change quite rapidly at first.
Philosophy of practice is dynamic. It's built to be dynamic.
I know. I love how I was trying to excuse myself. Um, so
I could see the mental gymnastics going on. It's like, I know people might think this, they might think that, so I'm going to say this to preface that, this to preface
yes,
it. And I would do the same thing. I
yeah,
used to.
Yeah, so here's what I have for now. So I mimicked your outline because it was clean and easy and made sense. So health, I basically, for my mission statements, is maintain physical and psychological health, because that I loved your explanation of maintain, because I have always gone, right, I must get better, get healthier, get stronger, get this, get that. But I really liked, like, I'm having some health problems too. By the way, side note, I've perforated my eardrum on the right hand side.
So you're really like me now.
Yeah, so left hand side can't see, right hand side can't hear.
Yeah, I'm both on the right. So
Yeah, so as you can probably imagine, it's like I
yes.
need to see you, but I can't hear you. It's very funny. Yeah, so I've perforated my eardrum. So maintaining my physical and psychological health is a little bit tougher than it was before. I can't do as much activity as I usually could, but never did anyway, to be to remain in integrity with who I am. Like, I used to be able to walk everywhere. At the moment, I can't walk as fast as I usually do because it flipping hurts. So basically those are that. But some of the health, and I, like you, really appreciated the idea of it's psychological too, not just mental health, physical health. It's just health, because it's way less complicated. So
I
the
also
first,
find it, sorry to step in, I also find it more encompassing because when you separate parts out and say mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, etc., what I find that does, because it's saying, okay, we have a part over here and a part over there, it somewhat overlooks the interconnectedness of the health. And when you look
yeah,
at a lot of the psychology, a lot of the therapy even, psychology is physical, mental, emotional, etc. It's all together. So when therapists work with individuals, they look at their physical health and their relationships with other people together. It's not a, oh yeah, you need to talk to that person more, or if you're not feeling great, you're not going to go out and talk to people more. So you need to be healthy, like wholly healthy, holistically healthy. And that's where the term holistic starts to irritate me a little bit when people say, oh yeah, you need to be healthy in a holistic sense, or you need to coach in a holistic sense, or educate, etc., and say holistic. I'm like, why do you need to say holistic? If you need to say
all
holistic, it means
encompassing.
that yeah, it means that you've separated parts beforehand. So why not just not separate them?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So the health one of the big ones is respect boundaries as it comes to myself and others. I have a slight tendency, especially with my family, to try and fix everything and solve everything, when sometimes they just want me to listen. And also, I let everybody kind of take advantage of me in many ways. I've had really negative relationships, not to go too far, but that basically my boundaries are not at all respected. When I put a boundary in place, I'm just questioned why.
Mm.
And then that means I back down, which is not me living in integrity with myself or committed to myself. Like, I'm not that's yeah. So that is something that's one of my big health goals, I suppose. For now, is just remembering that and being aware of that. And having that as a core focus for me is just maintaining and respecting boundaries.
It's a goal-directed behavior, or it can lead to goal-directed behaviors.
Yeah.
And I've said that term quite a few times on the internet recently, and I've been reflecting on it, and I feel like goal-directed behavior is a term that I've been familiar with, like I say, since my undergrad, because that's what we were meant to do inside of coaching sessions, have a goal-directed behavior, or meaning, task, focus, whatever interchangeable term you want to use. And when I look at goal-directed behavior on the internet and how it's used, directed behavior, or behavior in general, seems to be overlooked or just not used for whatever reason, and it's goals. They simplify it to goals, but obviously goals aren't necessarily behaviors. And psychology and health and well-being and all these other what I would class as buzzwords aren't directed at what behaviors, what you're actually doing. And the more I considered goal-directed behavior, and the more I was thinking about goal-directed behavior, the more I recognized that behaviors just aren't spoken about
No,
on the internet.
no.
It's all abstract concepts and
Yeah, it's
words. And like,
taken out. It's like when we use the brain or our mind or our this, it's like separating us as the whole complex being, and almost like denying responsibility in some way, or not remaining in integrity of just be like, oh, my brain thinks this. No, I think this. I'm just too terrified to say that.
yeah,
Which is something that, yeah, I'm like,
obviously we spoke about with the vulnerability of saying me, I, that was
yeah,
me thinking this, that's my opinion, or that was my opinion, I'm shifting it now. Yeah. And I would say the behaviors element of advice seems to be overlooked. And that, I think, this is where I'm at the moment. I think that is where the difference in a philosophy of practice, or in the way that I've expressed philosophy of practice, is slightly different from the other examples of values. Because we spoke last time and you said it feels different, but you couldn't articulate quite why it was different.
yeah, yeah.
And I think it's because of the emphasis on behaviors rather than the emphasis on theoretical abstract values or terms or goals, that they're less tangible.
It was interesting as I was kind of like looking, like researching, as I was thinking about values and what that is, what that means, just to get my head in the game as a, I suppose it'd be a warm up as such, if using your, huh, okay, that's fascinating. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. As I was looking that up,
I could see you as you were speaking. I was like, he's going somewhere else.
I'm going to just follow that because that's interesting. So, as I was looking at your philosophy of practice as I was designing my own, one of the things I was like, well, I don't really have, like, I can't remember what it was. I haven't got yours up.
Yeah, intermittent pause for a second. You know, the
Yep.
elevator music.
Yeah. So it was your session. I haven't put a session in mind because I was like, I don't really have sessions. I'm just a free wheel, like this and that. And I'm like, as I was saying that, I went, fuck, that was a warm up. What I was doing there was warming up. Oh, well, shit. So I will put that down for later. Because that's interesting. I didn't see that. I was not attuned to that as actually what I was doing. And then I was just going through, going, okay, cool. I see another example. Yeah, no, that's literally me warming up again and again and again. Oh, shit. Okay, fair enough. I didn't even realize I was doing that. So that was kind of fun for me just to experience that moment of like, wait, I do what you do. I just didn't know I was doing it. And now I'm like, does everyone do it? I wonder. That's interesting. So then, I mean, that's my curiosity value. Like, I'm just like, huh, other people think like this. Oh, that's interesting. That was one of the things that I was like, oh, do I put that in? That seems, when I had that value and I started putting that, I was like, oh, is that, am I allowed to have curiosity as a value? Is that right? And I'm like, yeah, but it's true. I just, I was going through the experience. We had a friend who was here, and they were talking about some really fascinating stuff that had nothing to do with anything that I'm interested in. But I was like, I just saw them kind of come to life as they spoke about it. And I was like, now I want to know more. I will never ever look at horse anatomy again, but I really enjoy hearing what people like. That's one of my goals, is discover the interest of others and what gives them the spark, which I don't like that word, but I know what that means, and that's fine. Because once people get interested or start talking about something that they love, I'm just like, do go on.
That's exactly how I treat online content. I
Mm.
don't watch online content from people that make content, because It's just boring. But when I'm watching a video, I may not care about the topic at all. The editing may be shoddy, but if they care about the thing, I watch the video. And YouTube has changed the algorithm quite a lot, and I'm getting more smaller creators talking about stuff. And the video editing's pretty poor. The audio can be dodgy sometimes because they are newer creators, which is understandable. I was the same. But if they're interested in whatever it is that they're talking about, I become interested.
Mm.
Right. Okay, that's cool. And they're exploring their own curiosity and learning whatever it is. And they're talking about this really abstract, random thing. So I watched a video yesterday. It was a video essay about yo-yoing, professional yo-yoing. I was like, okay, I don't even know what professional yo-yoing looks like, or all I see is a yo-yo going around a string. Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. But they were explaining that there's a 1A, a 2A, a 3A, a 4A, and in the 1 you have a 1 yo-yo, and a 2 you have 2 yo-yos on like different hands. 3 is when you combine the yo. Like, I'm learning all this stuff. Exactly, I'm learning all this stuff about professional yo-yoing. I have no interest of being a yo-yoer, if that's even a thing.
Yo-yo.
Yeah, well, I don't know what we call them. And they were telling various stories from professional athletes inside of this, I guess you could say, sport. And it was just really interesting. And what caught my attention towards the end is they then discussed how the rules and the guidelines of the yo-yoing sort of scores, how they score in competition, the rules don't necessarily match what creativity is for the sport. Because there was this professional guy, had won loads of stuff, and he did a routine and he came seventh. Everyone was expecting him to win, but he came seventh. And what the community thought was a really good routine, a really difficult routine. The judges didn't. So the judges didn't see the same creativity as the community of the yo-yoers. And they related this to skateboarding and the Olympics, with skateboarding being the Olympics. They take away some of the creative element because it's not a technically difficult skill. But if you're actually doing skateboarding, it's a really creative way to do the thing. So I had no interest in anything. Like, the thumbnail was dodgy, the audio was a little bit spotty, though it wasn't like, it was basically a presentation. There was a little bit of like pitch and yaw inside of the presentation, but there was nothing complicated there. But I watched the whole 20 minutes because they were interested about the thing and they made me interested about the thing. That's what I look for.
Yeah. And that has been like the cognitive one for me was curious conversations. Like, it was like discovering the interest of others, what gives them the spark. And also one of the ones that I put in, I might move it, I don't know yet, is just to create worlds to explore. Because what I've been doing, which links to my social, is a lot of D&D stuff and that creative aspect. I realized that my work that I get paid to do is less creative, because I'm now reaching a point where I've seen most things and can do most things. So I'm like, of course, good. It's not exciting. And I thought, like, my assumption was, if my work wasn't always exciting, then I need to find something else. But for me, I was like, no, because I can find that elsewhere. And also, I can find ways to make that exciting and interesting and fun. And so that was another thing that I was like, oh, cool, I like that. And so my final one is like the create worlds to explore, which I think, I'm not sure whether I'm happy with it being in cognitive, whether it's social. They're all kind of interlinked anyway, but it's just to have that creative freedom to create a world, because it's fun and it's exciting, and to put people in an environment that they aren't normally in and seeing what happens, because that brings curious conversation, that brings new experiences.
Does it have to be non-fiction?
No, it is fiction.
Does it have to be fiction or non-fiction?
No, probably not. No.
Because when you look at that and you take it into, I guess, moving it into maybe an academic sense or an intellectual sense, that is being a educator, a coach, someone that's exploring new ideas. It's taking someone from their preconceived notions and asking them a question and going, what if that wasn't true?
Which is that curiosity, which is what I've always. Oh shit, that's what I do in my coaching. I
Mhm.
need to. There is a thing in my way in my head about accepting the fact I'm a coach.
In your head, is it?
No, I am still fighting the idea of being a coach, which I need. I want to stop and figure out why, because I think it's getting in the way. It feels in the way.
The way I would address that, or the way I would try and
Mm.
challenge that, is to put coach into the lexicon and express what coach means to you. What is a coach to you? What do they do? Then once you've explored what a coach does, I would imagine other words are going to come up. So
Yes.
when you're trying to express what a coach is, you're going to say, okay, I think a coach teaches effectively. Okay, what does teach mean? Am I a teacher? Let's explore what teacher is. Actually, what does effective look like? What does effective teaching look like? Actually, maybe I'm not teaching, maybe I'm coaching. So what does effective coaching look like? Oh, competence. I think you need to express competence. Well, what does competence look like? What does confidence look like? What does character look like? What do athlete outcomes or learner outcomes look like? And then you start exploring the role that it is to be a coach. And now you have a lexicon that you can use to express a practice design.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Where that happens.
Yeah.
Literally, my day to day is make the world for my D&D and then spend it. And next week the kids aren't here, so that is I'm going to be diving really deep into this next week. A week it's just me and Tori's at work. And I'm like, yes.
I mean, it's how I've solved all the problems that I have. I
Oh,
guess from a step-by-step process, if people want a step-by-step, is write down the word that is most significant in the problem that you have, or the words, and
yeah.
then explore those words and what they mean to you, and then try and attach behaviors to what they mean, which means
Mhm.
you can actually put them into a practice design, and then you can use that as part of the way that you behave to see if it suits you or doesn't suit you.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. That's in there. I'm going to go look at that in a minute. Yeah, so where were we? We were all over the place. I love it.
We were in your pop.
We were in my pop. So that I mentioned the cognitive, which also links to social. So the social ones are this is more actionable, which was interesting. It's like I'm hosting regular D&D sessions, both in person and online. I am really interested in curiosity. That's what I'm interested. That's where like I am excited right now. Is just curiosity of others because my own, I suppose, the relationships that I've had in the past were not the most healthy. There is no clear boundaries, none of that. And I recognize that and I've gone, okay, cool. Let's do something about that now and discover and not even do something about it. It's more like, okay, cool. I'm not comfortable. I'm not happy. I want to be happy. So I'm gonna change and I'm gonna direct myself this way and see what happens.
So you said direct yourself that way. I would assume you have a goal-directed behavior in order to change those relationships. So what would you do to make it more effective? Because that's the way I would see something. So you described something as unhealthy or not as healthy as it could be. I would say the way I would express that, the terms I would use is it's not effective.
Yes, yeah,
It's not as effective as it could be. So
yeah,
how would you make the relationship more effective? Potentially adding in boundaries.
yes, which is exactly what I've done.
What are boundaries in terms of ecological approach?
Oh, they're constraints, I suppose, or affordances, either way. Yeah,
No, they're constraints. When you
yeah,
add in boundaries, you're adding in constraints in the relationship between you, other individuals, and the environment that you've created. So you're doing the constraints-led approach inside of your health relationships in order to, yeah, I know, it's great, isn't it?
This work.
It just makes sense. But yeah, so you're using the constraints-led approach to coaching inside of your personal relationships to make it more effective for you to function in the world.
So I'm going to add some words to my lexicon based on what we've said. So healthy, unhealthy,
What do they
effective.
mean? See, I've done it in an alphabet. I don't know whether you're doing the same
Yeah,
because
I'm doing
there
the
are
same thing.
so many words.
Yes, I'm doing it in an alphabet. Yeah, it's really cool. I'm just like, yes, this is helpful. Excuse me.
Do you go back and forth between the canvas and the lexicon?
Mm.
Yeah, I do the same. I look at the canvas and I sometimes I question the anything, whether it's a component of health or value, or and I look at it and go, I wonder. Go to
Yes,
lexicon.
that's literally what happens. It's I wonder. And often when I've started doing, because obviously I think I think I would have wanted to see you develop this as you go. Like, because this is my first one.
Hmm.
So what I'm doing is actually putting my thought processes, like the questions that I'm asking, I'm putting them down. So when it came to simplicity, I haven't removed the having the right amount of something, knowledge, information, physical things to do what you want. That's not gone. I've just put a line through it and finally figured out how to do that.
Oh, straight through.
Yeah, do a straight through. And I've literally left my reflections
Right.
in there because then I can look at it. Because one thing that I did do is I went back to my old vault, my personal vault, when I took part in this program that I was part of for a short while, before I stepped away. And there were things in there I'm like, yes, that is still something that I have even now, and has kind of led me in the direction that I'm in into the ecological approach, basically. One of the things that I've put, I think I've forgotten to put principles. I forgot to put principles on my little thing. Let's go do that now in design.
Your little thing.
The canvas.
All right. I find the canvas much more intuitive when exploring my pop, because when
Yeah.
I see other people's values, it's just a list of stuff. And yes, the canvas is a list of stuff, but it's more interactable because I can look at the values, I can look at the goals, I can look at the components of health all together at the same time. Yes, in Notion, you could do it in columns. So there's certainly a way to do it in Notion. But I don't know what it is about the scrolling up and down. I just don't like it. I much rather
I
zoom
can't
in and out.
stand it. I cannot stand it. It does my head in. I love being able to go. Sorry.
Zooming in and out. Plus, sometimes when I'm exploring topics or ideas or concepts, or I have a question about something inside of a canvas, I just add a blank card and just like arrow there. That's a thing I need to do at some point.
Yeah.
I don't have to be like, okay, where do I write this down so I don't forget it? Where do I put it as a task? No, I just double click, type words, and then drag to the appropriate box. I was going to say, for those listening in, I'm doing a Discord event next Friday, a Patreon Discord event where I'm going to explain somewhat my pop. So I'll leave that there. So
that'd be cool.
If people want to go through my pop and the Patreons, then they can have a look. If you've bought the course, you'll have access as well, Ecological Learners. So yeah.
Yeah. So one of my principles that I've got so far is responsibility is, consequences are. So there are always consequences, and I don't have that consequences are good or bad. They just exist. No matter what you do, there are things that happen. And the only thing, and I'm responsible for knowing where I am at, remaining in integrity during when there is consequences that I don't like, and what I want to do and how I want to respond to that. And what responsibilities am I willing to take? Because one of the things that I have commonly done in the past is jump into that victim of like, oh, this person's horrible, this person's making me do these things, this person's making me feel like this. And it's like, hang on, they ain't doing nothing. This is like this is me taking on a responsibility and then not being willing to keep that responsibility, and making sure that those are in alignment, in integrity with me, is important. So that is one of the things that I have been like, I took that, I learned that phrase in the World Leadership Program that I was part of temporarily for a bit, and I've taken that all the time, and it's definitely helped me recently.
Interesting. Whenever I hear those sorts of explanations, the way, or I guess the analogy that I think about is injecting emotions into people. That's what I start thinking about, because you can't inject an emotion into someone. Like, the person has to actually create the emotion themselves. And the way that I would explain that through the ecological approach is that the relationship between you, organism, and another person, organism, in the environment has affordances. If the other organism is acting in a way that elicits an affordance, it doesn't mean that you have to do the thing. So when you think about affordances through the analogy of the carpet, you've got the carpet or the blanket or the sheet, and then the affordance is pulled down. If you've got someone pulling something down over there, you can choose to go over there and then fall in that hole and feel like that. Or you can go, actually, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go over there instead.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you need to first identify the affordance. So you need to be sensitive enough to the information in the environment to go, okay, that's an affordance, that's an opportunity for behavior. And then you also need the expertise, the skill to say, I'm not going to go do that. Those are the two things that I think most people struggle with. Is one, the sensitivity of recognizing the affordance in the environment, and two, the expertise and skill in order to avoid those opportunities for behavior, because some opportunities for behavior, distractions, are much more attractive and easier to do because there's less effort. So it requires effort to avoid those opportunities for behavior, affordances. And those two things are the way that I would express being able to control my emotions. That's how I would control my emotions, through an ecological approach.
Yeah, I've just put down an opportunity for behavior linked to affordance, because as a lexicon, because I'm like, yes, that's a delicious explanation of affordance. I'll go play with that later.
That's what J.J. Gibson said.
I know. I don't remember all these things, and they're not in my thing.
You can't remember these things at the moment, or you struggle to remember them. Not I don't remember them, because you do remember them.
I do remember them. That is very true.
But it requires more effort to remember them.
Requires more effort to remember. Yes. Thank you.
The relationship between yourself and the environment needs to be rich. Yeah, adding loads of words to make myself sound smart.
So
sarcasm, by the way, listeners.
Yeah, yes, that is sarcasm.
Hopefully my tone got that across.
Who knows? So one of the cognitive mission statements I have is remain fat. There, don't do that.
Put your teeth back in.
Yeah, no,
Put your teeth back in.
Remain fascinated with the world and the people around me. Discover what they enjoy and discover the links that connect us. Which is good. And it's not, I need to play with that a little bit. It's a bit woody. I don't fully understand what I'm saying, but I do understand what I'm saying at the same time.
I was going to say, the way I would explain that sentence is there's a lot of words.
Yes,
but not much said. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I could feel that. I'm like, okay, cool. What does that actually mean? What is my mission statement? What does that actually mean? I need to work with that. But that's kind of like the first draft, as you say. Psychological active
There's a lot of drafts.
Huh?
There will be a lot of drafts.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm quite excited for that. Actually, I'm like, okay, cool. This is stupid now. This makes no sense to me. No. Yeah. So social, develop strong and healthy friendship groups. Develop my relationship with my partner. And then the other one is continual curiosity into the environment, or the perception of each member of my family.
Perception or interpretation?
Yeah, interpretation.
And this is where I like to be particular with the words that I choose to use.
Yes.
As obviously you express with the maintaining healthy or stable healthy. because it allows you to be more accurate and I would say more effective with your
Yeah,
behaviors if there is something that you can really focus in on or attune yourself to, rather than them being broad concepts.
yeah, yeah. So continual curiosity into the interpretation of each member of my family. Like I want to, the way that I put it in the wishy-washy terms, which aren't as specific, is being part of their world. I like to see, especially my daughter. The way the way she interprets the world and she sees the world is so very different to me, and that just drives and says, I'm just like, oh, oh, and I'm literally just leaning into that much more.
So this could be slightly ironic. Out of curiosity, what what have you got down as an explanation or meaning behind the word curiosity in your lexicon?
Oh,
Because you've put curiosity in the majority of your values and goals. So
I
it
have.
must be in your lexicon.
No. Okay. What is curiosity? An interest. That's a rubbish. That's rubbish.
But that's what I think a lot of people will assume. I'm curious about something, so you're interested in something. Is that high interest, low interest? What?
No.
Because you said you're curious about lots of different things, but being
Mm.
curious to me doesn't mean much.
Mm. I will have to sit with that one.
Mm-hmm. I may have just changed your entire pop, but
Thanks. Sorry. One in. Yeah, because I even when I put curiosity down, I was like, that's not enough. It it was there, but there was something not quite. What did I have over here?
it's the best word you had at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that to me is where the dynamic nature of a pop really gets beneficial because you're always writing something that is the best way to explain it at that time. And as you move forwards in time, you may question, like I've just questioned your curiosity. If you question a term that is fundamental to your pop, well, now you need to readdress everything that's related in some way. And to me, I've reassessed honesty quite a few times
yeah,
because honesty can mean lots of different things. And honesty has led me to behavioral integrity. To me, that's what honesty is. Honesty is being behaviorally integral with the actions that you make and the way that you act in the world. In simple terms, not being a hypocrite.
yeah,
I would say honesty is not being a hypocrite. That's what I have in my lexicon.
yeah.
But again, that's taken time for me to develop over time.
Mm.
Well, time for me to develop. I don't need to say the overtime bit because I've already expressed that part. But yeah, what else have you got in your pop that's worth exploring? Or what experiences have you had whilst making the pop that you think's worth exploring from someone, for someone doing it the first time or someone apprehensive about doing it?
Yeah, it was very. All I could sense as I was trying to do it is I had to get it right the first time, rather than it's like, oh, what are my values? And there was some judgment of what I wrote down, and often it was, oh, well, that's just wrong. And then instead of just going, well, that was wrong, get rid of it, I paused and was like, okay, what is wrong? Why does it feel like this? What is, and it often led me down a path that will help me find a better word.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I know as a student, I really struggled with the whole set some goals and do your values and this, that, and the other, which is why I didn't. I didn't have goals or values. What I just did what I thought I should do, which to
Mm.
me is a practice design. It's a philosophy of practice, and that's why I've used that term from the coaching literature because I don't like saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to follow my goals." You know, it's goal directed behavior. acting in a certain way because of the values that I hold and the way that I want to be portrayed.
Yeah. One thing that has struck me, like, especially in this conversation as I've been talking about it, is the session thing and how averse I was to a session.
Is it the
And
term or the concept?
I think it might be the term, because the idea of a warm-up, practice, and cool down sounds, yeah, it's almost obvious now. As I realized, oh, I was just warming up. That wasn't me doing it because I was just looking at it. There was no action, whereas the warm-up led into action. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting.
Did it lead into action though?
No, I was already taking
the
action.
Exactly.
I was already doing the action. Yeah, it was really because what my assumption was as I read that, and I was like, oh, so you just do a session and it's all fixed and binary. That was all the assumptions that came flooding back. And then as I was sitting there, no, that's not it at all. Because I remember you describing it and I watched your video as well around that. And it's like, I have grossly simplified that.
Because of our assumptions with time and the barriers and blockers that we put on time. I did in the open event discuss flow and deep work. People can look at again that on the replay, and it being well, how do you isolate that? How do you say I'm now in flow or I'm now not in flow? What does that mean? So I thought that may be an assumption people, well, you would have made when looking at that. Even though there is a warm-up, one session can be a warm-up for another session because they're overlapping events.
Yeah.
When we consider events rather than time, we have overlapping events. So a warm-up is an event, a session is an event, a cooldown is an event, but all of those events can overlap. So I could be editing as a session, but the editing could be a warm-up for my writing, which is writing as a session, editing as a session. So I don't need to take a break in the middle because the editing served as the warm-up for the writing. Well, no, you've just been in flow for 5 hours. No, I've had overlapping events, some of them as warm-ups and sessions, some of them as cooldowns and sessions, some of them just as sessions, but they're overlapping events throughout time. So where does the flow start? So where does flow start and stop? It doesn't.
What was interesting is on your pop you have warm up, practice, and cool down, but I hear you say warm up, session, and cool. Like I interpret what you're saying as warm up, session, and cool down, which is quite interesting. I was just like, that what you're saying there matches my experience and what I actually do without realizing I'm doing it. So perhaps for me, practice isn't the word that I would use. It would be session.
The reason I have practice there instead of session at the moment anyway is because the way I would express practice is goal-directed behavior following my practice design, whereas a warm-up is less constrained and a cooldown is less constrained. So the practice session has deliberate constraints in place to make my actions more effective, whereas a warm-up has almost no constraints. I can do pretty much what I want inside of a warm-up. The main goal of the warm-up, because it is goal-directed behavior, is to at some point start a practice.
That makes sense.
Because obviously a warm-up, as I've just expressed, can be a practice. A practice session can be a warm-up. And if I have constraints inside of a warm-up, then a practice session might not hit the constraints of the warm-up. So I guess you could say realistically, when you're going from event to event, I'm going from practice to practice to practice to practice, or session to session to session to session. I'm just doing the practice. But what's before a certain session or certain practice is an element of warm-up. But what does that element of warm-up look like? It could look like anything.
So do you view your day in that way of like, this is session 1, this is session 2, or is this a simplification for the benefit of audience and me?
I view the day as an entire session.
That's what I thought.
However, when I look at the calendar, I do have sessions blocked in as an ideal plan, but I don't follow them. They're more, essentially, they're adding constraints to my practice design, saying, I want to do a session here or around here. When I start that, when I end that, that's entirely up to me. And those constraints are added because of my maintain healthy, stable, goal-directed behaviors. I know I need to eat. So I know I need to have lunch. In order to hit that as a value, as a behavior, I need to have a time where I eat. So there needs to be a block of time outside of practice that is eating, which means I got to stop. And if I'm stopping, then I need a time block before it.
Yeah.
So when you look at my calendar, I have blocked sessions, but the blocked sessions aren't because of my practice design says I need to stop. They're there because the other goal-directed behaviors impose constraints.
Yeah.
If I didn't need to eat, I didn't need to talk to people, and I didn't need to do other things, then yes, I would just be practicing all day, every day, all the time. But I know as a person, as a human, and with other goals, there are other things I want to do. Speak with family, eat food, go outside, exercise, which adds constraints to the practice.
Yeah. I'm just reflecting on my own kind of what I've had as my as a bit time blocking. It's not really time blocking. It is sessions that I have, but I'm recognizing they're too necessarily, they're not constrained enough, like to match my goal directive, like the goal I want to achieve, the direction I want to go in. So that's something I'm just like, that makes sense. Yes, I'm gonna go play with that too.
And I would argue that is simplifying the information
It is.
by adding constraints, because you're reducing complexity.
I am.
So it's funny how you wanted to simplify things, but the behaviors inside of the time blocking you had there was too complex for you at the time.
Yes, yeah. Oh, this is good.
You're seeing the relations now between things. It's always interesting when you explore topics out loud and you start seeing relations and you sit there and think to yourself, I was saying this yesterday in the Discord event, I was saying sometimes when I listen to the audio recordings of myself, I sit there and go, you know what? I kind of sound smart there. Or, you know what? That's really dumb. Why didn't I just do that in the first place? When you just listen to yourself think, which is obviously what I did with my audio journal. So no, going back a year now, but yeah, hopefully that's been beneficial to people listening in. Have you got anything else you want to
add? No, because I'm probably going to be rewriting the whole thing.
So we'll do a revision next week, yeah?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening, and see you next week.